top wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, lined up at the number 2 wide receiver right here across the middle. Great execution. This was what really jump-started this drive to be able to come up with that huge game-winning field goal. Big play from Josh Allen, big catch from Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, 36-yard gain from Diggs there that puts them into field goal range. And then Allen moved them a bit closer to set up a 45-yard field goal attempt for Tyler Bass. He'd, of course, missed earlier, but he hits this one.
Big-time redemption for Mr. Bass. Like you said, he missed one that would have put them up 4 points, but he came down in the clutch. Huge for Buffalo.
Yeah, and he had missed an extra point, which would have meant they wouldn't have had to actually. Detroit would have had to score versus getting the field goal to tie it up. As it stands, Josh Allen does what good teams do, what good players do. Moves his team down the field, puts them in a position to win, and that's exactly what Tyler Bass makes sure that they do. 28-25 is the final for Buffalo as they improve to 8-3. The winning streak is over for the Detroit Lions. They fall to 4-7 for Buffalo, at least temporarily. First place in the AFC East until Miami plays this weekend. They, of course, are hosting the Houston Texans. Also joining us, Scott Pioli is here with us. Scott, I guess I'll come to you first. What a crazy finish to this game, but Buffalo manages to get the job done.
Yeah, the Buffalo Bills really made it happen when they had to make it happen. It was interesting. If you're the Detroit Lions, what they needed to do is make sure that they contained Josh Allen. They did that for much of the first half, did a terrific job of it, but ultimately it was one of those things that led to their demise. Allen ended up having, 78 yards rushing. But what was interesting on that very last drive, I thought there was going to be more pressure because there had been pressure coming from the Detroit Lions front where they were blitzing, but they were also getting pressure on Josh Allen, which then forced him to run a few times. It worked against him. But that last play, that pass to Diggs, he was completely clean in the pocket, had wide open windows, and he was able to make a key completion in that final drive.
And you talk about that play to Diggs, Scott, that was the first down play. So they instantly gained momentum by being able to come up with a huge completion to Stephon Diggs. If you're the Detroit Lions, in that situation where you have a little over 20 seconds left to go on the clock, granted the Buffalo Bills, they have timeouts at their disposal, you want to win first down. You want to find a way to win first down, and that can easily put you in a better situation knowing that you have the clock on your side to be able to force this game into overtime. But that was a huge big opportunity for the Buffalo Bills, and like I stated earlier, that jump-started this initial drive that led to a big-time game-winning field goal from Mr. Bass.
And we were in the studio here when Detroit tied it up. We thought that this game was going to overtime. Scott, your wife, God love her, she's holding the turkey for you, and there was a audible groan, you said, when they tied it up, because we thought we were going overtime. But then, BMAC, you said it perfectly. You said, wait a minute, there's still 23 seconds left, and the Buffalo Bills are still the Buffalo Bills. The Detroit Lions are still the Detroit Lions.
And Buffalo had timeout. And that's one thing I know about the National Football League. Heck, this is what I know about football in general. Good teams find a way to win ball games. Bad teams find a way to lose. And that's what we saw today. Even though the Detroit Lions, they might be the best 4-7 team I've seen in quite some time, but they still find ways to lose, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. And BMAC, you brought up a really good point. They had all of their timeouts. The Lions had, but we saw earlier in the game, the Lions were not doing a real great job of managing the clock and managing time. You know, we talk about the fact that they may be the best team with that kind of record. Here's one of the traps that the Lions have to be very careful not to fall into. There's so much positive reinforcement. Because they've been so historically bad, we talk about them being a team that's competing, a team that's coming close, their strength of schedule based on the teams that they've played already. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. But that really doesn't matter. What matters is winning and losing games. They are making progress. Their team should be encouraged. Their fan base should be encouraged. Their ownership should be encouraged, but they have to understand they're going to have to find ways to win games. You can't get caught in that trap of moral victories because moral victories are not a thing in the National Football League. Dan Campbell, we know how passionate he is. This is killing him right now. But it's good to see that they are making progress. They can't fall into this general malaise that can come sometimes. Oh, we were close. They've got to find a way to win some of these games.
Based on what you've seen from Campbell, BMAC, as a former player, I mean, we've seen Campbell talk about, we've seen the Hard Knocks, we saw him on Hard Knocks and whatnot, but do you think that despite the fact that this is one of those really, really tough losses, that he is the perfect man to be in that position for this team as it continues to try to push forward?
No question, because if you look at the tough losses they've endured this season, I mean, go back to last year as well. He's become a great coach in being able to keep his troops motivated, even though they keep losing some difficult ball games in the worst ways. I mean, we look at what we've seen so far this season. I mean, a tough loss from Buffalo. Before that 3-game stretch of winning ball games, they had a tough loss to the Miami Dolphins. They had a tough loss to Seattle, tough loss to Minnesota, tough loss to Washington. This is a team that has been involved in a very, very bad movie, a sad movie. And unfortunately, they end up on the wrong end of the stick. In that movie where someone is chasing them in the woods and they slip and fall, and we know how that ends. But I like the fight from the Detroit Lions, Scott, because one thing I can tell you about the Detroit Lions, even though they might not be the most talented team week in and week out, when they step on the football field, they're going to fight. And they're the type of sparring partner, if you're not careful, they'll hit you across that eye, and they might put you down on the canvas.
They're fighting and they're making progress. Jeremy, I want to help answer this question too. I think Dan Campbell is the right guy for this job right now because, again, we're seeing them improve. Here's the thing about Dan Campbell. He is very unassumingly intelligent. People get caught up on this whole physicality and his toughness. People can be tough and smart. They are not mutually exclusive. Dan Campbell is tough and he's smart. The other thing he is that is very unique, I think, in this league as things go, he is authentic. What he is absolutely what he is. There are no false pretenses. His team, players can sniff that stuff a mile away. B-Mac, you know this. Yep. Players can sniff whether the guy is real or not real. Dan Campbell is real, and the other thing he is he's consistent. And being around a lot of players, a lot of coaches, the best coaches that I've been around, they are consistent. Players know what to expect. And when players know what to expect, they can therefore focus on their craft and do what they have to do in terms of what their job is.
A tough loss for the Detroit Lions, who came into this game as 9.5-point underdogs, end up losing by 3 on a last-second field goal. So there's a lot of positivity, a lot of positive things you can take from this for the Detroit Lions. But, Scott, for the Buffalo Bills, is this potentially a division-saving win for them?
Well, I don't know if this win saves the division because they're getting ready to play a bunch of division games right now. It keeps them in the mix. It keeps them in the hunt a little bit near the front of the pack. But here are some of my concerns with the Buffalo Bills right now. They are banged up on defense. They have a number of injuries. We saw Von Miller go down today. We know that Josh Allen is not 100%. We're getting into the end of November and the beginning of December, and this is where things are going to start to separate a little bit. One of the things I was looking at before this game was, and it actually happened during the game, I was watching the number of missed tackles that the Buffalo Bills had, which has been a bit of a thing this year. That second touchdown run by the Detroit Lions, the number of missed tackles on that play, and you go back and look at the 4 previous games prior to today, the 4 teams that they played, the Green Bay Packers, the Cleveland Browns, the Jets, and the Vikings, they were 2-2 in those games, but teams were averaging 5.8 yards per carry. And when you get into this time of the year, if you are going to be a championship football team, you cannot play defense like this against the running game, especially when you're getting ready to go against some teams that are going to run the ball.
For me, this was a huge win in direction to try to win their division. I'm right there with Scott. I don't say just beating the Detroit Lions today ultimately gives them an opportunity to win their division, but it puts them in a great direction because this is a team, when you look at the Buffalo Bills, this was a winnable game. In the NFL, when you're a team that has championship aspirations, heck, playoff aspirations, you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Now, when you look at what they have the rest of the way the next few weeks, all divisional matchups against pretty good teams that have playoff aspirations as well. I have my concerns, as Scott mentioned, the injuries, especially to defenders on the defensive side. That's something you need to monitor. And oh, by the way, Josh Allen. Even though Josh Allen gave us nice numbers today, something seems to be a little off with him. And when you look at the chemistry or the lack thereof with his pass catchers, I don't think he's 100% healthy. I don't think he's 80% healthy, but they need him to get healthy as soon as possible if they have any hope to find a way to win their division and make a deep postseason run.
I agree with you. And even though his numbers looked good and he helped them win the game at the end of the game, you can tell that elbow is bothering him. There's something that's off. The other thing is this. People have not talked enough about the absence of Brian Daboll, who's the new head coach of the New York Giants. The absence of Brian, who was the guy who was there when they drafted Josh Allen, who developed him, who had this rapport with him. He has a very specific personality. He knew all the buttons to push and where to pull off of Josh. I don't know Ken Dorsey, and I'm not making a judgment on Ken Dorsey, but something hasn't looked right since the beginning of the season. It wasn't 100% Josh. So to me, something is off not only physically, but I'm wondering about where things are at with him and his offensive coordinator. And again, I'm not trying to make something up.